how do people become better allies and advocates for the people who are very literal in terms of like, what can I do to make this world a better place and a more livable, lovable place?
I think one thing is understanding the difference between covert and overt racism. I think there's a lot of things that are socioeconomically built into the mindsets of Americans today due to different things that you see on television, how you were raised. But overt racism, right? Because just because you're not a part of KKK or you don't use the N-word or you don't say derogatory terms to Black Americans doesn't mean that you don't have those subliminal thoughts, which is a part of covert racism, right? These are things you have to unlearn. Think about even after 9/11, right? Where they put the fear of God in us on seeing someone who's Muslim, right? Those are things you have to unlearn. Like if you go to the airport in 2000, from 10 years ago, right? You had this unconscious nervousness if you saw someone in a hijab. And you think about how silly that is, right? You have to unlearn those things that are built into you. And I think that's the same exact thing that you have to do if you ever had any covert thoughts of racism. If you ever saw an African American and thought to walk the other way, or if you were thinking that I have to do this because someone's Black, or if you decided to make some ignorant stereotype saying, oh, well, I have watermelon, right? Just those type of things that are just completely ignorant, but that's built into this society that you have learned. You have to be consciously and actively unlearning those things that have been built in you in order for you to change your mindset, in order for you to educate yourself, in order for you to uplift and empower those Black friends, Black teammates that you have. But one thing I think is really important to note is silence. I don't know if people think that that's better. I don't know if people think that that is helping. But silence, in my opinion, is extremely deafening, and it's truly it's speaking for you. It is placing you on one side over the other. And to quote Martin Luther King, if you're neutral in times of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. In my opinion, it's insane because I don't know why it's so radical to denounce racism. Shouldn't we all be against racism? You know, it's not a Black and white issue. It's an everyone against racism issue. So I think if you really want to be a part of the cause and really want to help, you can start by unlearning things that have been built in you to make you think that one particular party of people are better than another that you probably didn't even realize were about it. I mean, I think there's a lot of really good people out there that don't realize that they have these microaggressions, have these thoughts that come up in their mind and why it is that they think them. But I would definitely say, you know, again, with education and unlearning is definitely probably step one. But then, yeah, I think also if you're watching the riots, or I don't even want to call them riots, if you want to watch any of the protests, there are a lot of protests, peaceful protests, and you see these young white Americans stepping in front of the Black Americans, and they're literally using their privilege because they know that the police officers will be a little more apprehensive of harming them than they will their Black counterparts, to literally stop the violence and to uplift them. That's a very physical way of stopping that and using your privilege, but also using your voice when you know that it will be amplified a lot more than your Black counterparts. Those are two things that I think would be really helpful if you really want to be an ally.
Yeah, and I like just the fact that a white person knows their white privilege to do that AJ just said, step in front of a Black person at a protest or something. But the fact that like the cops like really can't mess with that. That's like the problem. Like they shouldn't, if that white person wasn't standing there, they would just continue to do what they were doing. But when the white person stands there, they stop, or they kind of go around, or they kind of are not as forceful as they would have been. Like that has to be like on both sides. You have like address the fact that the cop stopped probably what they were going to do, and address that it's with yourself that it was because of the woman or the man's white privilege. And like in terms of like call to action, obviously donating, make sure we're donating to like bail bonds, funds, things like that. Definitely look up small businesses, Black businesses, preferably, that have been, hit in some of the looting, which we can probably talk about that later. But making sure you're donating to the right causes, making sure you're having the hard conversations with your friends and family. And if you if your family asks you a question as like a non-Black person, make sure you do your research first, or ask a Black friend, or reach out. Don't just go based off of something you like. Be factual with it, because you can't deny the facts. You can't deny the facts. So I think being highly educated, donating, signing petitions, those are some really important things.
Sorry, real quick, and ask. If you have Black friends, ask how you can be helpful. I've had some of my white friends ask me, AJ, I don't know how to say this, but can you please help me? Can you please help me understand? It's really that simple. It really is that simple in order to try to progress and move forward. You're not moving forward, you're moving back. As you can see, this country is in the same exact state as it's been since 1960 civil rights, because it has not yet moved forward because people are uncomfortable asking those questions. So ask. Just wanted to insert that.
One of mine is really just almost like a self-reflection. Before you even become an ally, you have to understand that you're going to have to put away a little bit of your pride, and you're going to also have to understand that it's not about what your dad thinks, what your mom thinks, what your boyfriend or husband or wife may think. This is, you have to be able to think for yourself and be able to make decisions based on what you know is the right thing to do. So when you hide and you put away that pride, and you're not worried about, well, is this going to mess up my relationship with so-and-so, or is this going to mess up my brand? You have to be able to put that aside before you even think about asking your Black friends. Like, because when they say this is what you can do, you have to be willing to do it.
I agree with you guys 110%. I just have a question. So obviously you have to be able to confront that internally, but how do you, I feel like a duty to educate, as I'm sure you guys do as well. How do you try to educate somebody who is white, who is also colorblind? They love everybody. How do you educate them into thinking a certain way and understanding the history of it, understanding the struggles? Because I've came into contact with people who have a lot of buts, who make excuses, you know what I mean? Who will discredit these protesters because of the looting or the arson that's also followed by it. So how do you confront that, and how do you continue to educate when people are there's stubborn people out there who don't necessarily understand the scheme or the picture?
Okay, I'm going to jump in real quick. I think you guys have pointed out a lot of those things, which is if you understood the history and the emotional pain that's been passed on century upon century, generation upon generation, like it's a fact, like that shit gets passed down, and we are the ones that have to say, no, this is no longer how the system is going to operate. We've got to again, what you guys talked about was like support these causes that are going to uplift Black and brown people, LGBTQ communities. They have to be active. And that's what it comes down to. Like, I'm not really one to post a lot on social in general, but I do donate. I just don't like, you have to be an active part in the change. And Jazz, like you said, if we're 80 years old and our grandchildren are open up their history book and they open up to this period in time,
which hopefully they are. Hopefully this is not a skip either.
Yeah,
Anyways,
yeah.
sorry.
Like, I'd like us to remember to, like, when we look back at that time, where was I and what did I do? Versus just being that blip in the history. in the history book, because we can all be active participants in some way, shape, or form. And it's going to look different for everybody. It is. But I think taking an active stance, you have to care. Like if you don't give a damn, then it's going to be really hard for those people to be active.